Bishop Bloomer does it once again by exposing the subtleties of Satan in popular media.
I'm standing here with members of the television ministry, Life Media.
I think this is an excellent series, Bishop, for this time and for this season. So many doctrines are going out and through the media, through television, through radio, and I think that this is very important for Christians and as well as non-believers.
This time, the provocative and confrontational preacher, author, and writer takes on the New Earth philosophy, authored by Eckhart Tolle, and promoted by America's daytime sweetheart, the popular talk show host Oprah Winfrey. Brilliant is she, likable, lovable, caring, articulate, intelligent, spiritual, beautiful, courteous, motherly, rich, engaging, influential, provocative, just all around good, and deceived. It shows you how far Satan will go to promote his agenda against God, but not for long. The Antichrist is a spirit lurking about and looking for powerful, influential, popular, likable person to host his satanic propaganda. But just as cancer attacks the weaker cells, seeking a host to instigate the destruction of the entire nervous system of the body, so does radiation treatment and chemotherapy rid the body of those contaminated cells. Bishop Bloomer explains, I believe that Oprah is called of God and will fulfill her destiny and purpose in the earth as long as the chemotherapy and radiation treatment of prayer and intercession are injected into the body, pushing out the false teachings of New Age philosophy. This is my purpose for teaching this message. Do you really know who Jesus is?
Do you really know who Jesus is? I mean, do you really know? We've asked the question, but we really haven't answered it, assuming that you knew. Jesus is not just a mere man. He is God. Jesus is God.
One of the first things we learned when we started this was that all but the most skeptical historians believe Jesus was a real person, even though when you come here, you do not find any physical evidence.
It's good that Jennings admits that Jesus was a real person. Some have tried to make Jesus into a myth, but the evidence that Jesus lived in Judea in the first century is overwhelming. Jesus was a historical person recorded by Christian, Jewish, and pagan historians. In fact, there are many well-known non-Christian historians who mention Jesus. Tacitus, in his Annals, mentions that Christ was crucified under Pontius Pilate and gives detailed descriptions of Nero's persecutions, which are also alluded to in several places in the New Testament. The correspondence between Pliny the Younger and the Roman Emperor Trajan corroborates the New Testament history, including the persecutions of the Christians under the Emperor Nero. Flavius Josephus, the first-century Jewish historian, makes mention of Jesus, John the Baptist, and James, the brother of Jesus. Scholars note that the New Testament corroborates Josephus in minute detail. Keep in mind that Josephus wrote his history after the time of the New Testament. In other words, both sources were written independently, but both agree with each other. So Josephus testifies to the historical reliability of many of the passages in the New Testament.
Contrary to what many popular skeptical commentators may say, most scholars regard this passage as genuine once certain Christian interpolations are removed. Well, the word interpolation refers to any instance when, in the copying of a document by hand, someone has added in something that was not previously in the text. Some people would refer to that as a form of forgery, but there's a difference between an interpolation and a forgery. A forgery is something done with some sort of malice or ill intent. An interpolation may or may not be done with that kind of intent. A forgery is a type of interpolation, but not all interpolations are forgeries. All ancient writings, and even those up until the medieval era, up until the time of William Shakespeare, all have some kind of errors or mistakes in copying. They may be interpolations, they may simply be clerical errors of some sort, but every ancient writing has problems of some kind. There are no copies of Josephus that do not have at least some mention of Jesus in them. Now, there are some variations, for example, in an Arabic translation that do not have some of the suspicious phrases that we think are interpolated, but there are absolutely no copies of Josephus that are completely missing references to Jesus. When looking into this matter, I found a work by Louis Feldman, who is probably today's leading scholar on Josephus, and Feldman did a survey of views on this subject. And the people who think it is a forgery versus those who think it is entirely genuine runs in something of a bell curve. You have a small number who believe that it is entirely a forgery and a very small number who believe that it is an entirely genuine passage. The most people believe that it is a genuine passage with just some interpolations. Now, the passage as we have it currently received reads as follows. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as receive the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. He was the Christ, and when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, for he appeared to them alive again the third day, as the divine prophets had foretold these and 10,000 other wonderful things concerning him. And the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct of this day. The portions that are considered most suspicious are the ones that seem to make Josephus sound like a Christian. For example, he says, he was the Christ, which is not something that we would expect Josephus as a loyal Jew to say. Now, if we take out the portions that are considered most suspicious, here's what we are left with. Now there was about this time Jesus, a wise man, if it be lawful to call him a man, for he was a doer of wonderful works, a teacher of such men as received the truth with pleasure. He drew over to him both many of the Jews and many of the Gentiles. And when Pilate, at the suggestion of the principal men among us, had condemned him to the cross, those that loved him at the first did not forsake him, and the tribe of Christians so named from him are not extinct to this day. Now there's a shorter passage in Josephus about Jesus that comes from a section that is about James, the brother of Jesus. In the context of this passage, James has just been executed, and Josephus briefly refers to James as the brother of Jesus, the so-called Christ. It must be taken into consideration that so much ancient literature has been lost, and that could have been due to destruction, whether by Christians or indeed by pagans, or simply by works being neglected and not being copied any further. And it is amazing that we do have what we have about Jesus in Josephus, in Tacitus, and in other writings.